from this hearing.
I'm out of time, sir. I'll take this up with your team in another setting. We'll be out there in a few weeks. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here. And we don't lose sight of the fact that you're a great American success story. It is a part of everyone's life and business, sometimes maybe too often. But I thank you for taking the time to be here. And our concern is to make sure that it's fair. We worry because we're looking at possible government regulation here, certainly the self-governing, which has had some issues, and how you factor that. And we're trying to keep up with the algorithm changes on how you determine the prioritization of the news feeds, and you look at, well, it needs to be trustworthy and reliable and relevant. Well, who's going to determine that? That also has an impact. And even though you say you don't want the bias, it is dependent upon who's setting what those standards are in that. And so I want to ask you a couple of questions, if I may. And this is a quote from Paul Grewal, Facebook's VP and General Counsel. He said, like all app developers, Mr. Alexander Kogan requested and gained access to information from people after they chose to download his app. Now, under Facebook policy in 2013, if Cambridge Analytica had developed the This Is Your Digital Life app, they would have had access to the same data they purchased from Mr. Kogan. Would that be correct?
Congressman, that's correct. And a different developer could have built that app.
Okay, now, according to politifact.com, and this is a quote, the Obama campaign and Cambridge Analytica both gained access to huge amounts of information about Facebook users and their friends, and in neither case did the friends of app users consent, close quote. This data that Cambridge Analytica acquired was used to target voters with political messages, much as the same type of data was used by the Obama campaign to target voters in 2012. Would that be correct?
Congressman, the big difference between these cases is that in the Kogan case, people signed into that app expecting to share the data with Kogan, and then he turned around and, in violation of our policies and in violation of people's expectations, sold it to a third-party firm, to Cambridge Analytica in this case.
Sure.
I think that we were very clear about how the platform worked at the time, that anyone could sign into an app and they'd be able to bring their information if they wanted and some information from their friends. People had control over that, so if you wanted, you could turn off the ability to sign into apps or turn off the ability for your friends to be able to bring your information. The platform worked the way that we had designed it at the time. I think we now know that we should have a more restrictive platform where people cannot also bring information from their friends and can only bring their own information. But that's the way that the system worked.
And whether in violation of the agreement or not, you agree that users have an expectation that their information would be protected and remained private and not be sold. And so that's something that, the reason that we're here today. You know, and I can certainly understand the general public's outrage if they're concerned regarding the way Cambridge Analytica required their information. But if people are outraged because they use that for political reasons, would that be hypocritical? Shouldn't they be equally outraged that the Obama campaign used the data of Facebook users without their consent in 2012?
Congressman, what I think people are rightfully very upset about is that an app developer that people had shared data with sold it to someone else, and frankly, we didn't do enough to prevent that or understand it soon enough.
Thank you.
Now we have to go through and put in place systems that prevent that from happening again, and making sure that we have sufficient controls in place in our ecosystem so that way developers can't abuse people's data.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. My time's expired. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Zuckerberg. Thank you very much here. You know, I was just thinking about Facebook and how you developed your platform, first from a social platform amongst friends and colleagues and enjoying a community. And a lot of that was based upon trust, because you knew your friends, right? But that evolved into this business platform, and one of the pillars still was trust. And I think I think everyone here agree that trust is in short supply here, and that's why we're here today. Now, you've constantly maintained that consumers own the data they provided to Facebook and should have control over it. And I appreciate that. I just want to understand more about what that means. To me, if you own something, you ought to have some say about how and when it's used. But to be clear, I don't just mean pictures, email addresses, Facebook groups, or pages. I understand the data and information consumers provided to Facebook can be and perhaps is used by algorithms to form assumptions and inferences about users to better target ads to the individuals. Now, do you believe that consumers actually own their data even when that data has been supplemented by a data broker, assumptions algorithms have made about that user or otherwise? And this is kind of the question that Ms. Blackburn has come up with, our own comprehensive profile, which is kind of our virtual self.
Congresswoman, I believe that people own all of their own content. Where this gets complicated is, let's say I take a photo and I share it with you. Now, is that my photo or is it your photo? I would take the position that it's our photo, which is why we make it so that you can't bring, it's that I can bring that photo to another app if I want, but you can't.
Well, once it gets to the data broker, though, so there's certain algorithms and certain assumptions made. What happens after that?
Sorry, can you clarify that?
Well, what I mean is that if you supplement this data, you say you're owning it, but you supplement this when other data brokers, use their own algorithms to supplement this and make their own assumptions, then what happens there? Because that is, to me, somebody else is taking that over. How can you say that we own that data?
Congresswoman, all the data that you put in, all the content that you share on Facebook is yours. You control how it's used. You can remove it at any time. You can get rid of your account and get rid of all of it at once.
No, but you can't claw it back once it gets out there, right? I mean, that's really, we might own our own data, but once it's used in advertising, we lose control over it. Is that not right?
Congresswoman, I disagree with that, because one core tenet of our advertising system is that we don't sell data to advertisers. Advertisers don't get access to your data. There's a core misunderstanding about how that system works, which is that, let's say if you're a shop and you're selling muffins, right? You might want to target people in a specific town who might be interested in baking or some demographic, but we don't send that information to you. We just show the message to the right people. And that's a really important, I think, common misunderstanding about how the system works.
Facebook sells ads based at least on part of the data users provide to Facebook. That's right. And the more data that Facebook collects allows you to better target ads to users or classes of users. So even if Facebook doesn't earn money from selling data, doesn't Facebook earn money from advertising based on that data?
Yes, Congresswoman. We run ads. That's the business model is running ads. And we use the data that people put into the system in order to make the ads more relevant, which also makes them more valuable. But what we hear from people is that if they're going to see ads, they want them to be good and relevant.
But we're not controlling that data.
No, you have complete control over that.
The gentlelady's time has expired. Call the Energy and Commerce Committee back to order and recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Lance, for 4 minutes for purposes of questions.